Welcome to the Civic Hub. The Civic Hub is a shared community space for grassroots and small nonprofit organizations working to make lives better for everyone in Waterloo Region. Partner organizations come from a range of fields: environmental justice, democratic reform, arts and culture, anti-poverty, anti-racism, human rights, ethno-cultural and newcomer support, technology, peace and nonviolence, spirituality, and well-being. On the show, we welcome one of our partners to the Civic Hub.
Today we have Marinus de Groot, from two organizations, Home Range and Arts Together. Marinus, welcome to the Civic Hub.
Thanks, I'm happy to be here.
So tell me, you've got the two organizations that are members of the Civic Hub, but you're a member of many other organizations, the instigator of quite a few of those. Tell me about Home Range.
Home Range is an offshoot of the Commons Studio at the Working Center. And originally it was called the Multicultural Cinema Club, and it was always run under the auspices of the Working Center, but in partnership with both Waterloo Regional Arts Council, which I was in charge of, and the Social Planning Council, which is now the Social Development Center and part of the organization that's behind the Civic Hub, right? So those three organizations incubated this project led by a Syrian filmmaker. He came here long before the Troubles. His name is Azam Foukalade. His dream was to set up what he called the Multicultural Cinema Club, and it was actually modeled on clubs that exist in Syria. And it included having tools for filmmaking and videography, that kind of thing, but also film appreciation and encouragement and all of that. And we were partners with that. And then somewhere along the way, after the Arts Council disappeared, I ended up working at the Common Studio along with one other. It was a two-person operation, and it was even just a half-time, but we kept it going. But during COVID, they actually transferred it to the Kitchener Public Library. So all the equipment we had a lot of really excellent equipment. Top-notch, cinematic quality equipment. You could make do any kind of work with it. But it went over to the library. But my job was programming and development, and I was left on my own. I was looking for funding here and there, and I come up with programs. And the programs I had, using funding from sources like the Kitchener-Waterloo Community Foundation, and the New Horizons for Seniors was one that I had a lot of luck with. And my programs, I didn't want to run a program just for seniors. I don't like the way we compartmentalize, isolate generations. And we happened to have a lot of younger people, high school students and Conestoga College students who were associated with the studio. So my programs were people who were young, working on an equal basis with people who were retired or near retirement. That was the premise. And I think we stumbled onto something that has all kinds of potential. I won't get into the whole thing, but that's basically, so then the studio goes over the KPL. I still have my programs. I've got nothing to do. I'm sitting at home isolated because of COVID and all that. And so I started calling myself the Home Range Story Kitchen. It was originally the Common Studio Story Kitchen, and I chose the term Story Kitchen because it fits with the Working Center, with Marita's Kitchen, and we were always a little bit odd for the rest of them, and it was a way of sort of we're like you, we just cook up different kinds of things in our kitchen. That was the purpose. So that's it. And so I've been sort of poking away. It's barely an organization. I have, some colleagues, so it's a collaborative sort of, but I'm the main person. I get some funding, a little bit of funding from the city of Kitchener, and I've developed a few partners and have some projects. And while these things are going on, I've been cooking up schemes and plans. And so I'm more ambitious now than I ever have been in my whole long life.
Yeah. Home Range conjures up a deputy dog singing "Home, Home on the Range."
Well, that's part of the Story Kitchen was the connection with the working center, but the Home Range was the connection with CKWR, because we had developed a partnership where we were doing a program, a kind of on a magazine, community radio magazine, and the range comes from that amazing signal that CKWR has that goes out over into southwestern Ontario. It has quite a broad reach.
Yeah.
And home is my emphasis on the local and the regional. Before I did any of these things, I wrote the arts and culture column for the Waterloo Region Record. It was locally focused, and over those years, I did that for 22 years, but that really important part of our community, your daily newspaper, you just watch it get thinner and thinner to almost nothing. And I think it's the local aspect, what local means and what regional means, that I'm particularly interested in. And I want to do something to help fill the gap that's left. It's not just the newspaper, the television station. It used to I think that they did, I read somewhere, they did 100 hours of 100 different programs every year, original programs of various frequencies, right? Some were daily, some were annual, like the Oktoberfest parade. Still, they did a lot. It was part of, and the radio stations too. One by one, they just became commercialized, bought up, and it leaves a huge gap to fill, and I like to think about ways that we could fill that gap.
Right. So you've been filling it by running this program called Promenade on CKWR,
right?
And now syndicated as Home Range on Spotify is one of the places where you've got.
That's right. That's right. Just recently, I've stopped going on. I regret it because I still think that terrestrial signals mean something. You just don't throw all that away. And there's also something about a program that's curated, and it goes hour by hour, and it's daily and weekly and that kind of thing. I think those things are important, but you do what you can. So the programs, I try to make one available every week, every Monday. An hour program, usually interviews. The theme is projects.
Not necessarily the arts.
Not necessarily the arts. And I particularly wanted to get away from, like at the record at first, when I was first hired, I was hired to do op-ed, commentary. But over time, that evolved into, first they call it entertainment section, it became arts and entertainment. This was reflections. But now, when Metroland took over, it wasn't either. It was what's on. And at one point, I got orders. I could not write about big organizations. I couldn't do any op-ed. It had to be small organizations. It had to be only events. They were trying to fill in for how few staff they had to cover, and getting complaints, particularly from the smaller groups, saying, how come you don't cover us? Why is it always the symphony? Because the symphony has people who are writing press releases, and that's why it's easy to see. But that's how I ended up doing What's On, and I wanted to get away from that. I thought projects, undertakings, I really admire. You see that so much in the arts. Somebody has an idea, and they kind of run with it. And it's different than opening a business or anything. You just do it for the love of it, for the sake of doing it. You're actually committed to the mission or purpose. And it doesn't have to be too lofty, but I really admire when people do that. I also think we need to do so many different things to get through all the challenges that are ahead of us. We're going to have to experiment. We're going to have to dare. And I think to give examples of people actually having the courage to go out and try something, even if they fail, that was my mission with the program.
You're not going to get that from the big corporations.
No, and that's where we have the smaller ones have the strength. Like, we can actually do so much better than they can, because they can't move. They're big lumbering beasts that someone controls remotely. If I was a combative person, I would say they're easy to bring those dinosaurs, but I don't want to bring the dinosaurs down.
No,
I just,
the dinosaurs will go on their own.
yes, that's exactly right. They'll go on their own.
Yeah. And then there's Arts Together.
Yes, Arts Together goes back even farther. I used to be the executive director of the Waterloo Regional Arts Council. That got replaced at one point as a long story by something called the Creative Enterprise Initiative. That lasted for 3, 4, 6 years. At one point, there were a group of people who wanted to come back. They were particularly concerned about the morale in the arts community. Say, we've got to do something. It wasn't necessarily a challenge to Creative Enterprise. It was something we should organize on our own. This was 2015, 2016. And we got quite far, but things kept getting in the way, and then COVID hit, and so Arts Together is the name, one of the names. The other one is Waterloo Regional Arts Reboot, and sometimes I just call it RAC Redux, because there were some people who just revived the Arts Council. Right. But it has a board, a transition board. I've got some colleagues working on it, so it kind of exists. But like the home range, it's kind of a shadow of its former self, but also carrying all sorts of possibilities. And they're both very small, and they're both very much me doing them.
Yeah, I see there's a fair bit of overlap there.
Yeah.
With home range concentrating largely on local projects and arts projects, and then Arts Together doing, roughly the same thing.
Yeah, except there's more to, like, my thing about the arts, and this was already a slogan I tried to use when I was with the Arts Council, that it's not a sector, this special interest. Right. It's actually an all points connector. It's everything every concern, every possibility, every fantasy is connected through the arts. And I discovered that particularly when we were doing the second culture plan for the city of Kitchener, when Arena Harris, who was an artist herself, a writer, she dove in there, and what she ended up with was something, instead of having a culture department, it touched on every single department in the city. It's related to transportation, it's related to economic development, obviously, it's related to community development, it's related to all these things. And I think that's the role of arts and culture. And that is also where we can be of service, particularly on the local level with municipalities, the region and the cities. Their backs are against the wall. They've been treated really, and it's almost an impossible situation, particularly how the province has we're not even allowed to plan. It's illegal now, the countryside line. I mean, what the heck? But those are the kind of things you're up against. Plus, the only way a municipality can raise money is taxes on people's houses. That's it. And they're left to do so many things that should not be paid for by taxes on our houses. Or our buildings that we have businesses in, right? Real estate, that's all we have. So I think it looks so grim on all fronts. There's a quote, I think, from Tom Galloway when he was leaving. He said, they've made it so miserable. It's made that I'm happy to leave. And I don't think it's going to get any better. I think what arts and culture and heritage, to some extent, can offer our municipal leaders is something to get involved in, that we can actually make a difference, that we can have breakthroughs, that we can have a few wins. And actually, in terms of the nation, there's these people going around saying Canada is broken, and this is a way of showing we've got all sorts of resilience. Everything is blocked up. It's just jammed. The whole system is jammed up. Things are not flowing back and forth. It's imbalanced, but it's not broken, because ultimately it's us, the people, and there's a lot of resilience and strength there.
Yes. And arts and culture, that's what people want. I mean, that's the reason we all have the day job. It's so that we can spend the non-working hours doing the arts and cultures and the things that we enjoy doing.
And it's odd, because I think actually it's also a way towards a future where we have an economy. People are doing things for one another, and there's 8 billion of us on this planet. I think pursuits in relation to arts and culture are the fundamental human work. You go back before there were any cities, anything, what people do when there's enough food and when there's no enemies at the gate, they start to dance, to remember. They look up at the stars and they make stories up. They paint pictures on the cave wall. This is what we do.
Yes.
It's why we eat,
Yeah.
so we can do those kind of things, right?
Yeah.
And right now, the flows of an economy, they don't go here. It's done for free or for next to nothing, or it's subsidized or whatever. If we found a way of actually having those circulations include this kind of work, then we'll have a breakthrough. Because 8 billion people can't be making cars and refrigerators and, chickens in a chicken in every pot, that kind of thing. That old material kind of way of thinking about prosperity, we'll blow up the planet if we keep doing that.
Yeah, and what you're calling prosperity isn't really prosperity for everybody. It's prosperity for the select few that then hire everybody else to do the labor so that they can enjoy that prosperity.
And that's not even prosperous. Even they think they're secure, but it's actually nothing. These are just numbers. It's all fiction. And if one of these days somebody's going to say, look, there's nothing, and they're going to be sorry. So they really need we have to really think about totally redefining what prosperity means.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily distribution. It's more that things circulate. It's not that there's pieces of pie that have to be distributed. It's just that when you think about particularly how we measure money and stuff like that, it works like your blood works. It takes energy and distributes it, and then it gets replenished. It's not how much blood you have or where it's piled up or somewhere.
No.
And you don't, measure your health by adding up all your red blood cells. That's not it. It's how they circulate, what they do. And there we'll be on the road to something different,
So
right?
having it go around, having it touch as many people as
Absolutely.
possible is the best way to spread prosperity.
Absolutely, yeah.
Making that available to everyone, yeah.
That's it's a simple way of looking at things, but I actually think there's some, we have to find a way that it's simple and easy to understand. And it's not dumbing down, it is simple. I mean, here we are, human beings, we all have this, there's so many of us, each of us have skills and abilities. We just have to do things for one another, and that's it. That's an economy, right?
Sometimes complex problems do have simple solutions.
Exactly.
How's the Civic Hub helping make this a reality?
Well, with the Arts Council, we were involved with the Social Planning Council from early on. The example of us incubating the Multicultural Cinema Club is an example of that. But we also worked a lot together. When Trudy Bone was in charge, I ended up with the Arts Council, and we were told by the cities that it was particularly information systems that they wanted us to do, and so we worked on an inventory. We wanted to know where everyone was. Just a simple list. Can you be found is the question we asked, and then we put together a directory that we published. Now,
That's the famous Blue Book, is it?
Well, I knew about the Blue Book, and I said, hey, there's another organization over there doing information. And they had something called the Information Network and all that. So I connected with Trudy, and it was a long-standing and really, really beneficial partnership, because it was with her that she guided us, and we made sure that if there's something that would duplicate, we would work together. We connected with the University of Waterloo and ended up developing this online. It was just wonderful. So I've been involved with the social planning council right from the beginning. So it was a logical thing. In fact, Trudy was still alive when she first talked about the Civic Hub, and I had some, we imagined what this could be. So in some ways, I was there right from the very beginning. So it was only logical. And then, of course, when it actually came around, and since I was floating around and homeless and in exile, it was a logical place to go. And also because of my feeling about the intersectionality of these things. And the arts are not a sector, it's an all points connector. And I think there's so many different groups, so many different things at the Social Development Center that it was just a logical place to be. And so it's been very, very helpful. I mean, there's other groups, particularly Peace for All Canada, who are also interested in radio or journalism kind of things, and have developed really good partnerships there. And it's someplace to go, and you connect, you find stories for my radio program. It's a place to just go and be, and I also really like it that's part of the church. And now I see all my working center colleagues around all the time because it's where the St. John's Kitchen returned to. So it's a happy place for me, partly because it's such, I don't like the term hub because that sort of swallows everything up. It's not that, it's an intersection.
Yes.
And it's these interconnections that are so interesting and so important that we're not making the full use of. You know, people talk about silos and differences and distances. I think this kind of organization is a step towards breaking out of some of those things.
There's so many of the other groups too, what you said about intersectionality, groups that use the arts as a means of getting across their message for homelessness. So there's KW Kaleidoscope that's doing theater performances to illustrate the issues around homelessness. Red Road Journey, which uses the arts and craft techniques to illustrate Indigenous issues. So you're absolutely right. Intersectionality is something that you can really get at the Civic Hub.
Definitely. There's nothing else like it.
Yeah. How have you integrated into that, into the Civic Hub? What have you seen there that's been beneficial to you?
Well, it's particularly the relationships and the partnerships, particularly with Peace for All Canada, where I became quite heavily involved. I'm on their advisory board. There's four of us who have almost like a radio show, but it's more like a conversation every Tuesday morning that's posted as a podcast, and we call ourselves the Peace Brothers. And then also we've been going out into the world and developing partnerships because it's a peace transition project, interested in peace. And so we opened up connections with the at Conrad Grable, with the Center for Peace, Development, all those kind of, so it's been really interesting. And it's interesting that there's also people who have exceptional abilities, and Ayiko Solomon is one of those. He's got a gift that he learned when he was in United Nations camps in East Africa, growing up as an orphan, really, or as he puts it, a slave when he was a child, but African kind of slavery where you get adopted into a family, that not buying and selling on the, that's different. But
still, still being there, and
it was there that he discovered his abilities, and he does have extraordinary abilities, and it's satisfying to be able to support him in any way I can.
You have to bring Ayiko back on the podcast.
Yeah, you should.
Let him explain.
You can bring, maybe the whole Peace Brothers will come.
Go down to their studio.
We can do that too, because we do have a little studio there. But it's not like this one with soundproofing and all that kind of thing. It's noisy, because upstairs there's the St. John's Kitchen. You hear people tromping through that gym and banging on the way. But I think that actually adds to the atmosphere. You're telling people that you're in the real world.
Right. Yeah, you're not isolated in a studio booth someplace.
Exactly.
You know what's going on in the world because you're in the real world.
Yes. Yeah.
What's coming up? What are you planning for future activities?
Okay. One thing is I've revived something called the Sand Hills Parlor. And these are actually talk circles. And it came out of, at one point, I volunteered to be on a committee that the city of Kitchener put together to come up with a new vision for Kitchener downtown. And my original interest and how I got how I turned from a resident to a citizen is through that. There was a conference in 1993 called Visions 93. City Hall had just been built. And almost like a conversion experience, I got interested in downtown revitalization. So now, 30 years later, the city's asking who wants to come up with a vision. I volunteered, I got on it. We did it for a year and a half. In the end, the vision is fine, but I felt there were a couple of things that didn't get the attention that I think they deserved, particularly if you're talking about the revitalization of the I think there's too much, it's the business, it's the commercial, but it's also the civic center and it's also the cultural center of our city. So arts, culture, and heritage, they thought about, festivals and having things downtown to bring customers, but they didn't think about the art gallery and the symphony and all that. And also what they didn't consider is that amazing constellation of neighborhoods that surround our...
Right.
And there was once long ago when I was on the committee that was supposed to plan for the new Kitchener market. They did a study. They counted the people who were there for 2 Saturdays in a row in November. And in the end, there was something like 16,000 people that had gone through, and 60% of them walked there. And I thought, wow. And this was like 10, 15 years ago, before people were talking about, 15-minute cities and all that. And I think, if you're talking about business and also even the arts organizer, even the symphony, the first people you should be thinking about is the 30,000 people or 40,000 people that are within walking distance of where you are. Come on. And there's very, very little. The neighborhoods are totally disconnected from, because in part, the business community has gone off in different directions. There's hardly anything there. I mean, there's a few, all these marijuana places and vape and check cashing. I mean, there's nothing anybody in a neighborhood would have any deal with. So
much rather have a music shop, a music library.
Yeah, there's so many things that it could anyway. So my little circles, my Sand Hills parlor circles, are meant to talk. What I wanted to do is come up with not a separate vision, but a little bit of a plan, an action plan related to those two things: arts, culture, and heritage, and neighborhoods in relation to our historic city center. And I'm reviving that. We did it every week, and the next one will be on the 28th. I used to move them around a different location each week. The next set of them will be at the former, and it will be future Fresh Ground Cafe next to where the Common Studio was. The Working Center has very kindly given us that space, 5 to 7 o'clock every Tuesday. Everybody's welcome. We just talk.
Right down on Kitchener King Street.
Exact, King Street, and way downtown in the East End,
Yes,
right by the market.
So, Marinus de Groot, thank you so much for coming in. Welcome to the Civic Hub, and hope you manage to fulfill this vision of arts and culture all over Kitchener and Waterloo region.
Well, thanks so much. You've been a wonderful host, and it's been a real pleasure being here.
You've been listening to Welcome to the Civic Hub, where we welcome community partners to the Civic Hub. The Civic Hub is online at civichubwr.org. You can reach the Civic Hub by email at civichub@waterlooregion.org. Welcome to the Civic Hub is produced at the studio of CKNSFM 102.7 Radio Waterloo. The show is sponsored by the Social Development Center of Waterloo Region. The executive producer is Alexander Petrovich. Ritika Sharmali is the producer and host, and I'm Bob Jonkman. Civic Hub is supported by the Region of Waterloo Upstream Fund. The theme music is A Good Bass by Kumiko from the Free Music Archive and used under Creative Commons CC0 license.